Hello, and thank you for joining the CAI Greater Houston's webinar today. My name is Jesus Zanza, and I'm the Executive Director for the Greater Houston chapter of CAI. I hope everyone is doing well and surviving the COVID outbreak. We have a great presentation for you today, and so I'll quickly go over a few items and then hand it over to our presenter. The presentation is being recorded and will be emailed to all along with the PowerPoint presentation after we conclude, and that should be sent out later this evening. The presentation, during the presentation, you can submit your questions directly to me via the chat feature, and I will communicate with Cass to answer those as best as possible. At the end of we will open up for questions, so you can unmute yourselves, and then please, when you're done, be sure to mute yourselves. This course, in addition to others we've held, the past three actually, have been submitted to CAMICB for CE credit, and this is for the CMCAs out here. We have received verbal approval on all. However, we learned yesterday during our CAI leadership training that they have such a massive backlog. They're delayed in processing it. So please, for those of you who are waiting for these certificates, hang in there and know that we'll get them to you as soon as possible. So let me jump right into it. Today, we are honored to have with us Cass McKenzie with McKenzie Rohde. And before I read his bio, I want to thank his firm for his commitment to our chapter. Not only are they Silver Premium Partners, which is a sponsorship level that helps sustain our organization, but they are active members who continue to devote their time and energy whenever CAA calls. And so thank you, Cass, Montana, and everyone at the firm for your involvement. Cass McKenzie has devoted his legal career to protecting the rights of homeowners and homeowners associations and has represented thousands of homeowners and their associations in mediations, arbitrations, and trials. Cass has been at the forefront of protecting homeowners' rights in the public arena in Colorado and Texas and has served for 6 years on the board of directors for CAI in Colorado. It goes without saying that Cass has devoted much of his time to public education and the rights of property owners. Thank you, Cass, for being here today, and I will pass it on over to you to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Jesus. We appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and we appreciate everything that CAI does for our community. It truly is something that we feel is the greatest advocate for homeowners and associations in our community. So we're always glad to participate, and we appreciate everybody coming in, signing in today. What I was going to talk about today is obviously we're operating in a different world out there than we were, 4 or 5 months ago. We have different considerations about how to manage our properties, how to move forward with our properties, how to get the things done that need to be done to take care of our properties. We have different considerations about how to expose our association members and their tenants and vendors who want to come onto the property, and those considerations need to be kind of complied with. But at the same time, the properties are just moving forward. The properties don't know that it's COVID. They still need to be maintained. They still have warranty repairs that are going, and they still can suffer defects or suffer from defects that have to be dealt with. So what I tried to do today was bring some of those things to the table and give you, I think, some practical ideas or considerations to have when you are trying to manage maintenance, warranty repairs, or defect kind of issues at your property. So that being said, I'm going to go through and kind of talk about this a little bit, and then at the end of it, I'll go through and kind of give you some examples of some pictures of different types of problems and maybe how you would want to go about dealing with those, and then we'll obviously open it up for questions. So obviously COVID has created additional concerns and delays in dealing with property defects and maintenance. The first and foremost concern is how to protect our owners and tenants and managers from additional exposure. If you have to perform maintenance, if you have to perform a repair, if there are warranty repairs going on, what is going to be in place that you can do or put in place to protect the individuals that are going to be involved in those things from additional exposure? And then following up on that, how do you protect the HOA from legal liability? And I think you'll hear this constant theme from me today: consistency, 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 meaning have a plan. If somebody's going to be coming on the property, this is the plan for coming on. It has to be, registered a certain amount of time. The individuals coming onto the property have to, have to have face masks. They have to have, if they're going to go in interiors, they have to have gloves. They have to have booties. Only certain amount of individuals at one time. They have to keep, certain distances from each other. I think those are plans that every association should have in place, and then should publish those plans and let the owners know that, look, if the association is going to be bringing somebody on the property, these are the things that we want done. And if the owners are going to have somebody individually coming on the property, such as a vendor or something like that, to do work on their unit, these are the things that the association would like to have happen. And then also making those requirements known to the vendors, saying, look, when you come onto the property to do work, these are the safeguards that you need to have in place. What I'm seeing from most vendors out there right now, most competent vendors anyway, is they have already built in protocols to protect themselves from legal liability. And when I say protect yourselves from legal liability, what I'm really meaning is that if somebody does get exposed to COVID, the argument can't be made that, look, you could have put better safeguards in place to protect that person from getting exposed. And so when I say protect yourself from legal liability, what I'm really saying is you had a COVID plan in place, the association had one, or the property management company had one in place, and therefore we've done everything that we could possibly do to protect anybody that was coming onto the property and the owners and the tenants. So that's how I'm talking about protecting from legal liability. But I think you see from most vendors and contractors out there right now that they're doing the same thing. They are being very cautious about, when they're working on projects or on buildings or properties or whatever, that they have their own legal safeguards. So I think through the double protection of the association having requirements and the vendors having requirements, you should be pretty safe in moving forward and getting things done. But then at the same time, you've got to protect the property from further damage. And I think what you'll hear me today, and I think kind of the theme of what I was going to talk about a little bit, is what is the issue? What's the nature of the issue? Is it something that needs to be dealt with right now? Or is it something that can wait a little bit longer? And this will really be true in the maintenance kind of area. And then in some of the catastrophic kind of water leaking type defects we'll talk about a little bit. If it's something that needs to be dealt with right now, that's where the protocols for having what owners are going to be doing or what vendors are going to be wearing, how everybody's going to be protected when they're on the property, that's when it's really important. If it's something that you can wait and do maybe 6 months from now, then my recommendation obviously will be to do that. What you don't want to do is just to try to inundate the property with too many people. I mean, clearly the grass has got to be cut. The irrigation lines have got to be maintained, things that need to be done just on a day-to-day basis. But then when you start adding other layers on that by having multiple vendors on the property at the same time, that may not be a great idea. So, a good example we'll talk about here in a minute may be painting. If you're scheduled to start painting your property, you might want to push that back for 6 months. That's going to be a lot of people that are on the property. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Builder warranty repairs is another issue that warrants some consideration, because a lot of times those are repairs that are being dealt with directly with the owners and not with the association themselves. So the association or the property management company might not have a lot of say-so on whether those warranty repairs are going to go forward or not. But that shouldn't stop the property management company or the association from saying, look, owners, if you are going to have builder warranty repairs or outside vendor repairs, here are the things that the association wants in place to before they move forward. And so we're going to talk about that just a little bit. And then in the defect arena that I revolve in, protecting the HOA and the owner from legal rights. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. There are time limits in Texas for when you can bring claims if you have a defect at your property. Nicely enough, when this all got started, the Texas Supreme Court stepped in and put a stop on those time limits, and they stopped running for up until June 1st. And so nobody was under any time constraints to feel like they needed to move forward with a lawsuit or a claim or anything like that. Those have now been lifted, and that clock is ticking again. So we'll talk just a little bit about that at the end, but it's really not the focus of the conversation today. So just real quick, clearly there's 3 different categories that we're worried about here. Like I said, maintenance, preventing maintenance such as painting, stucco repair, sealants repair, roof repairs, roof inspections, things that are in your reserve study, those kinds of things that are done on an annual basis. These are the ones where I'm really recommending that if they can be put off for 6 months, put them off for 6 months. Or if they can be put off for 30 days or 60 days even, just to give yourself a little bit more time. But some of them may not be able to be put off. I mean, you may need things that are done. But on the maintenance side of it, things that are done just to maintain the property, those are the ones where I really would consider, can we do this at a later time, as opposed to should we risk exposure by bringing people in to do that. And especially when you're doing big projects like painting and roof sealants or things like that, that typically is a fair amount of people that are going to be on the property at one time. Anything that's going to cause a lot of people to come onto the property, if you're doing a big job, a big project, those are the things that I would really recommend to your boards. Hey, let's think about doing this a little bit down the road. Then obviously you have your warranty repairs performed by the builder under the 1, 2, or 10-year warranty, and owner versus HOA warranty. And I talked about that just a few minutes ago. If the HOA is working with the builder to get warranty repairs, again, and this I think is my biggest theme here today, is this something that needs to be done right now? So if it's a grading and drainage repair, if that's something that is causing continual damage to a building every time it rains, then yeah, you probably need to get them out there and do it. But if it's just standing water, or it's something that's could be put off a little bit longer, then I would recommend you do that. With the owners, again, owners are deal with the builders a lot directly on warranty repairs or things that need to be done inside the interior of the units. And I don't think the association has the ability to step in and stop that by any stretch of the imagination. However, I think what the association should do in going back to this is have a policy in place. Okay, owners, if you are going to have somebody come on the property and do work on your unit, whether it's a builder or an outside vendor, these are the things that the association wants done. 1, we want to know who's coming on, when they're coming on. 2, if they do come on the property, they need to be wearing a face mask. They need to be wearing booties. They need to be, wearing gloves. They need to not interact with any other owners. They need to just come to your unit and come into your unit and do your work. So things that are, in addition to normal standard requirements that you would have for an association anytime an outside vendor came in, just adding that additional layer on and publishing that, publish that protocol, put it on the association website. If you don't have a website, send it out in a letter. I think anytime that you're looking at from a legal standpoint, how can the association protect itself? If you've shown that you've got a plan, you've made that plan noticed or notified the owners of that plan and what the protocol is, then it prevents really the argument down the road that the association or the management company wasn't taking steps to protect the members themselves. And so anytime, like I said, consistency, being consistent in what your protocol is, letting your owners know what that protocol is, and then enforcing it and making sure that everybody complies with it to the extent that you can is important. The bigger one is probably with defects. A defect obviously is something that was not designed properly, not constructed properly, or not done pursuant to the manufacturer's installation specifications. These are the types of things that can occur because of a rain event or a structural failure, something like that, a catastrophic type event. These are the ones that may not be able to be put off. And we're going to go through some examples here in a minute. If you have defects that are occurring at your property, then the real evaluation needs to be is, do we need to protect any further property damage right now? And if we do, then when we bring the vendors into play, then these are the protocols they need to have in place. If it's a defect that can wait, again, for us to deal with, a few months from now, because it's really not causing further damage to the property yet, then let's wait about it. And we'll go through some examples here in a minute and take a look at that. But clearly, when you have something that is a rain event or a water loss event or a water event that is causing additional damage to your property itself, those are things that you just can't wait on. And you need to get somebody in there to kind of work on them and take care of them now. When those people are coming in, then okay, when you're coming onto the property to do the repairs, here are the precautions or the protections that we need to have you put in place to protect our owners and our vendors. So just taking a look at some of those, the typical areas on that are roofs, windows, exteriors, decks, foundations, drainage, concrete, asphalt. These are the things where we typically see defects. Also, looking at the size of it, right? I mean, it's impossible to build a modern day association, whether it be single family homes, condos, townhomes, or whatever, and not make a mistake. Somebody's going to put a piece of flashing in wrong. Somebody's going to put a roof thing in wrong, or somebody's going to screw something up once, or nail through a pipe. Something's going to happen. But when you're having systemic defects, it's not just one location, it's 10 locations. Then that's not just a bad day. That it means that you have a bad method of construction that occurred. When you have those kind of things going on, then that's a bigger decision. Obviously, if you have a rain and water's coming in somebody's roof, then you need to go out and get that fixed at one roof. But if you're seeing that at 10 different roofs, then now we're talking about a much bigger repair, a lot bigger exposure for somebody coming into the property itself. So those are bigger considerations than just a vendor coming out to fix one thing. Kind of just looking at some of these. So this roof clearly has been having drainage problems for a while. You can see where the staining is occurring, where the water is not draining to the scuppers to drain off of the roof because the roof is not sloped enough to get the water to the scuppers. This isn't something that happened overnight. The fix for this is going to be a longer term fix. It's not somebody coming in to just fix a rain event that just, started leaking into somebody's unit. This is something that if you still can protect the property rights of the association, which I'll talk about at the end, I don't know that I would have somebody out there right now fixing this. This is a bigger fix. It's going to be a week, 2 weeks for people to be on the property. There's going to be a number of people coming out to the property to do the repair. And this is a longer term type of a repair. So this is maybe something that, unless it's causing damage specifically down into units, something like, I'll go back here in a minute. Unless it's causing damage specifically into units, that you might want to wait on. Now, this would probably be a different story. You've got wind damage here, which has blown the shingles off because they were improperly fastened by the nailing pattern. Now you have got exposure of the roof deck itself. This is probably something that you do want to have somebody come out and fix right now. This is a one-day fix. Even if they just do a temporary sealant of it, a covering on it, if they don't re-shingle it, this is not a major thing. Now, if this is occurring at multiple roofs, it's still something that you probably would want to move on quicker because the roof deck is really exposed here now because it's lost the shingles. So evaluating what the nature of the claim is, I guess, is my message here, is really what I think is going to drive, do we want to risk exposing people on our property to outside vendors because we need to get this fixed? So it really kind of comes down to that case-by-case evaluation. if this is something that here, clearly we're seeing water coming into the soffit. If this is something that just happened overnight during a rain event, then you would probably want to get somebody in there and get it out. You know, quite frankly, on something like this, I would get somebody in there to do it. When you're seeing water that is seeping through the interior framing into the stucco and staining, then that means that there's probably some pretty bad damage going on behind that. This isn't something that I would let set for a long time. It's not draining into a unit. This is outside, so that's good. But at the same time, you can tell that there's water behind the exterior cladding into the interior framing, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. There's another example where you're seeing water coming down through the vents and through the scuppers, and you can see the staining. So that's an indication that we've got damage going on behind this product. And so these are things that you would probably not want to wait on very much longer. Here, this was a project up in Tyler. This is a little different. It's kind of like back to the flat roof. Obviously, the nature of this problem is big. What was going on here is the stones were not properly battered and attached to the interior framing. So they just started popping off and falling off. It was something that wasn't causing a lot of water intrusion into the building, so that was good. But at the same time, it's going to have to be fixed. But this is a long-term fix. I mean, the actual fix on this building took 6 months because all of that stone had to be taken off and completely re-adhered. So if you're having a problem like this may be something that you want to wait on a little bit longer. Try to do some kind of a temporary covering of it or temporary sealant of it. But it's going to be a bigger repair for the association. There were going to be 15, 20 workers a day on the project trying to perform this. Scaffolding was going to have to be put up. You know, there were going to be workers, you know, all over the project. There was going to be a lot of outside exposure. This didn't happen, obviously, during COVID, so nobody cared. But now it's something that you would want to think about a little bit more. This is going to be a good example of why you don't want to wait too long. So it may be hard to see from my screen, but right underneath the balcony railing on the outside under the white trim, you can see a little dark stain that's occurring there. It was pretty clear to us, but it might not be clear to everybody that water was probably getting behind the siding here and was causing that staining. And a lot of times you would see something like that and you think, we can wait on that. Let's just put some caulk on it, or, you know, and here's the one thing I would not be doing is something like this right now is I would not be power washing. A lot of people look at problems that are environmental like this, and we'll look at some more in a minute, and they think, well, we'll just come out and power wash. Right now, there's no reason to be power washing. I'm not a big fan of power washing, period. I don't think it's a good idea to inject high pressure water onto buildings, especially when there may be other problems going on. But right now, the look of the building is not something you want to risk bringing people onto the property for. But regardless, the reason you don't want to wait on things like this is when we did pull it off, you can see what was going on behind the siding themselves. And so that's when going back to some of the pictures I talked about earlier, when you saw the staining in the soffits coming through, you knew water was getting in there. And water is probably going to be affecting the interior framing if it gets captured behind there. So that's when I say you don't want to wait too long, because you still need to preserve your property values. You still need to preserve damage to your property. And when water is getting in there and you're seeing telltale signs of it, like the staining, those aren't things that are just going to go away. They're not going to get better on their own. Texas is obviously a very wet state. It's a very humid state. And so what happens is when that water gets trapped inside these building components, it can get really bad really quickly. This building here was only about 3 years old when we found this. So when I talk about pushing things out, waiting on them like I did with that first roof, not things that you want to wait on forever, but you maybe want to think about a little bit. Here, because this was a structural balcony, people were standing on this, the structural framing was almost gone on this when we got in there, you really want to consider about whether, you know, you need to have somebody come and look at it. Here's a different example. This was a project I represented up in Dallas. Clearly, the nature of the water intrusion here is so bad that even though this is going to be a big fix and it's going to cause a lot of people to come onto the property to try to deal with it, it's not one that you want to wait on. And here's why. It was every balcony. And the amount of structural damage that was going on at this project was massive. These balconies all were condemned, actually, as soon as we pulled off some of this, the stucco and saw how bad they were. People should not have been walking on these balconies at all. So there's that health and safety thing that kind of comes into play. So it really kind of comes down to a case-by-case basis. And it may be beneficial if you think you've got a systemic thing like this going on at your property to say, you know, let's have somebody come out and walk it. Whether it's me or a contractor or anything, say, look, we're concerned about our balconies. We're concerned about our roof. We're not sure whether we need to dig into them right now. It's not just one location. It's systemic. So this wasn't somebody that just had a bad day. This may be a project-wide problem. And even though if it is, it's going to cause a lot of, and you can tell just by the nature of this repair right here, how many people were involved with being on this project every day, that you would want to get somebody out there, because this is another picture of the same project. It doesn't take long for it to get real significant with some of the property damage that can occur. Now, not that this would occur at every building, but you know, or in every type of project, but it's just, I think, a good example to remind people that when water is getting into these buildings, it can happen fairly quickly. So why right now it's important to not bring a bunch of vendors onto the property because of the COVID exposure, it's also important to be cognizant of your property itself, because the property doesn't care about COVID. It's going to continue to deteriorate. So if you think that there is something significant going on, you're going to have to go ahead and move forward with it. And by moving forward with it, you're going to have to just do it in a way that you can protect your owners and your tenants as absolutely much as you can, with COVID protocols and COVID protections put in place about what people have to do when they come on the property. Here's one that I would wait on. So this is just a painting issue. The paint on the application on this siding, you would think it was water, but actually really what happens was this was getting a lot of sun and the paint just was not withstanding the sun. Does it look bad? Absolutely. Would I power wash it? No way. And I don't think anybody in their right mind would. But is this something that can probably wait? Probably so. You know, there's not an indication of real water damage occurring here. It's just an aesthetic product kind of failure. So do you want to risk having somebody out at the project right now to paint this? Maybe not for the next few months. But you know what? It's always up to the association, right? I mean, all you can do as managers is lay it out to the association and kind of say, look, here's the risk. Here's the suggestions. If we're going to move forward, here's how I would suggest we moving forward. And that is having an HOA protocol in place for vendors coming onto the property. Here's one I wouldn't wait on. You know, this is actually a structural failure of the building. So the building was sinking and it was starting to separate. And not only is that going to continue to occur, but now that it's separated, now we've created another avenue for water to actually penetrate into the building. Now, this was going to be a big fix. Piers were going to have to be put underneath the building to kind of stabilize the structural movement. But somebody could come out and seal that joint right now to prevent further water water from getting in there further every time it rains. So again, looking at each kind of a condition on your property, whether it be maintenance or warranty or defect, and evaluating them on a case-by-case basis, those are the things you want to do. Here's one I would wait on. This was just, this is a siding thing, and it's not attached properly. The proper nails were not used to attach the siding, so they started sliding off. If they fall off, you need to have somebody come out there and re-put it back on. But as far as coming out and protecting it, the building's still pretty protected from water, although behind some of the siding, we saw a lot of damage with building paper, but is it going to need to be done? Absolutely, it's going to need to be done. Does it need to be done tomorrow? Maybe not. So it's one of those ones where you just kind of want to play it on a case-by-case basis. Another example here, not to be redundant, but you look at this, and so a lot of people here would maybe say, well, just power wash that. That's just environmental. And it is environmental. So what's happening is the water's coming down that roof, it's hitting that siding, and there's no guttering system. So it doesn't really have anywhere to go. So it just runs off the surface of the building. The problem is that the connection between the stone and the siding, there were a lot of gaps and a lot of mortar joints that were open. And so the water wasn't just running around the outside of the stone, it was going to the inside of the stone too. And then it was penetrating inside to the building itself. So that's going back to my suggestion about not power washing. The last thing you really wanted to do there, a lot of people will just come power wash that off the stone because it looks bad. But when you're doing that, you're actually injecting more high pressure water into the building itself. So if you are going to power wash, make sure that somebody's done a very thorough check of what you're power washing and that you're not actually doing more harm than good to the property. Here's one you can't wait on, right? So this is an interior side of a unit. Water's leaking through the window. The window was not properly flashed. This isn't something that can wait at all. And in fact, this is probably, depending on the nature of some of these kind of leaks, you might need to get somebody out there within 24 hours. Here's where it's really important to have your protocols in place. All right, owner, we're going to have a vendor come in and do a window repair in your unit to repair this. This is what we're going to have. We're going to require them to have masks, booties, gloves. Only one person is going to be able to come in, what have you. And then make sure the owner's okay with that. Make sure, well, one of my first questions, when we're doing inspections right now is anybody in the unit having any COVID problems? Because we certainly don't want to come in and just exacerbate that situation. And if they are, this maybe have something that has to wait a little bit. But if they're not, just make sure the owner's okay with, hey, look, we want to come fix your window. Clearly, you don't want water running inside the unit. Here are the things that we are going to put in place as an association to protect you from the vendor coming in from outside. Are you okay with doing that? And most owners are going to say yes, but some may not. Some may say, you know what, I don't want somebody in here right now. I'll just put towels down or something until we get things better. And if they do, that may not, be something that you can do much about. So, but anytime you're having this kind of damage inside the units, these are things that clearly I don't think you should be waiting on. You probably need to see somebody looking at this as much as you can. This is one that you would think maybe you could wait on a little bit, but then we get back to the health and safety issues because this is structurally getting ready to fail. This overhang balcony was literally getting ready to start falling off because it had so much deterioration that it had rotted from the inside out and it was getting ready to fall off. So when you're seeing something like this, especially if you're seeing it at a number of different locations, it may be very wise to just have a contractor or an attorney or somebody that deals with construction things come out, look at them, and give you an opinion on, hey, this is something I think you can wait on or something that I think you need to deal with right now. That's my time. I'm over time. Sorry, Jesus. I'll finish up. So some of these are just further kind of examples of things that you may, when you're seeing this kind of problems at your units that you may want to deal with them right up front right now, or something like this. Maybe you could just seal and deal with down the road. Grading and drainage is another good example. This clearly has been going on for a long time. And it was not yet causing damage to the interior of this unit, although it was going to start doing that eventually if it wasn't taken care of. But again, this was going to be a big fix. Because of just the nature of this was going to take a lot of repairs. So you've got to evaluate how many people are we going to be bringing on the property versus the need to get it done now. And then these are just some kind of examples of don't wait forever. I mean, clearly this didn't happen overnight. I get surprised sometimes when I walk out to properties and I look at something like this and I'm like, when were you going to do something about this? And it just that some people's timelines are different than others. But clearly, if you wait too long, If you let mushrooms start growing out the outside of your building, then you've probably waited a little bit too long. So just kind of review, be consistent, notify the HOA members. This is our protocol. This is what we're going to put in place as an HOA to take care of. And it's going to be different for exterior versus interior access. Interior access is probably where you have the most concern because you've got somebody coming inside the living space. The clear ones, face masks, booties, safe distance, making sure the vendor assures you that whoever's coming out there has no COVID exposure as far as they know of, no COVID symptoms. If owners have COVID symptoms, that there's notification of that to you so people can quarantine themselves away from that. All of these are, I think, important points to put into whatever your HOA protocol is going to be. If people are going to be on the property, limit the number of persons as much as you can. It's a lot better to have 2 than 10. But sometimes, given the nature of repair, 10 people may be required. And then schedule the access, notice to the owners, these people are going to be on this property at this time. Here's what they're doing. Here's what we've put in place to protect the owners. Is that okay with you? And make sure that, transparency is everything, I think, right now. Staying transparent, in constant contact with your owners and letting them know this is what the association is doing to try to protect the property. I think that means everything. Then clearly when to get help, like I talked about, reoccurring problems, excessive maintenance, unusual damage, obvious defects. These are things that you just don't want to let go too long. And the reason is this, and this is the last slide I'll leave you with today. In Texas, if you are having significant problems and you want to be able to make a claim against whoever built those problems, you only have a certain amount of time to do that. You have 10 years from the date the property was completed to bring a claim. This is outside of any warranties that may be given by the builders. This is something that is provided to you under Texas law. You have 10 years to bring a claim. But within that 10 years, you only have 2 years from the date that you knew or should have known about it. And most of the things all of the things I've shown you today were pretty open and obvious. And you could have known, well, some of them weren't, like the nailing on the siding. That wasn't something that was open and obvious so much. But you have 2 years to bring a claim from when you knew or should have known about it. So you can't wait forever. And that's why I say you've got to balance the need to get it done now versus protecting the rights of the property owners. Because if you don't bring your claim within these time periods, then you don't have the ability to bring a claim anymore. And there's some things that can change, extend to 2 years, and we can do that in a whole different presentation. But you got to keep in the back of your mind that you just can't wait forever. So that being said, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks, Cass. That was very informative as a serial DIYer, remodeled 3 homes. I'd say I've seen some of those pictures in real life, so it's never fun. Let me read off a couple that came in. The first one is, how should HOAs handle PPE for outdoor contractors? For example, wearing a mask for a fence repair in the heat.
Yeah, I agreed with that. It's a tough call from that standpoint. You want them to have the mask on, but at the same time, it's hot. I think the mask is really important when they're in direct proximity to the owners themselves. So let's say the fence is connected to the amenity center, and people or right next is by the mailboxes, or it's where there's a high traffic area for a lot of owners to be moving through and out. Anytime you're within that kind of, I think what the social distancing is 6 feet, but I even expand that. If workers are going to be within 20 feet of owners around the pool, around their unit, anywhere in high proximity, then they're going to need to wear the mask. Now, does that mean that they need to take more breaks? Like, if they're every 10 minutes or 15 minutes, do they need to go off and take a break and take the mask off? That may be fine, and things may take longer. If they're doing a fence repair and they're out, on the backside of the property in a common area by the detention pond where there's not a lot of traffic, then they might not need the mask as much. But I think that what I would recommend for my HOAs is to say, look, if you're going to be within 20 feet of any owners or a high traffic area, then the masks are going to have to be worn.
Great. And the next question is, how do you address homeowners who are increasingly looking for a refund on assessments for unusable common areas who might look at exterior deferred maintenance as another way, or the another way the HOA is collecting dues without expenditures? I think this speaks to maybe a public perception.
It is. And you know, I don't know that there's any hard and fast law here. What I've tried, and this is a little bit outside my expertise, but I mean, it's something that we have talked about a lot. I think that you can try to do what's reasonable. I mean, I hear this same argument from restaurant owners. You know, should we be paying full rent right now when we can't open our restaurants to full capacity? And I see a lot of landlords working with like extended payments, rent abatements, things of that nature. I think that's just going to have to come down to your HOA. How much of the amenities are being the owners can't use? You're being prevented from using them. And deferred maintenance. I mean, what are the things that we're not being able to do right now? But that, you know, telling owners that you don't have to, you know, pay your monthly dues and monthly assessments, I'm not sure is the best way to go, because that's going to put the HOA in financial difficulties. Not everything goes to maintenance, but at the same time, I see a lot of HOAs out there right now working with their owners, and if they're in financial difficulty on their assessments, you know, extending the payments out, saying, all right, you can make a 50% payment now or 25% payment now. But I guess the short answer is you just try to be fluid as much as you can. You know, HOAs still have to function. They have to finance themselves. That money only comes from one place, from the monthly assessments, and they have to do things to take care of the property. And if the money's not coming in, you know, vendors aren't coming out and doing the work for free. They're not coming out to do the maintenance for free. So hopefully that answers the question, but I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think communication is key there.
Yes, agreed, 100%. And consistency. You know, I'm going to go back to that one more time. Be consistent. So if one owner is asking for something and you decide that the HOA is going to do something for that one owner, be ready to do it for everybody else. Mm-hmm. You have to be consistent. I think where HOAs get themselves in the most trouble is they treat one owner one way and they treat another owner another way. And that inconsistency is where you run into real problems.
That's a great point. This may be out of your wheelhouse, but it speaks to, this is a pool waiver specific question. If that is out of your wheelhouse, you know, waivers in general.
I'll answer anything. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll toss it out there. Can you speak on pool waivers or waivers in general? I think pools are obviously a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
So any insight you can provide?
And I'm assuming like a waiver of liability, if you want to use the pool, you know, you're exposing yourself to own risk.
Right.
You know, I think the law is a little bit all over the board. It's going to be first determined what does the waiver state? How is it published? Is it open and obvious? Is it clearly asking the owners to waive rights just for exposure, or, you know, you're asking the owners to waive all rights they could ever have against the HOA? So I don't think that they're unenforceable. They're not completely enforceable in all situations. I think the best thing to do then again is publish them, make sure everybody's on notice. You're using this at your own risk. Make it open, make it obvious. If you've got questions before you want to use the pool about the waiver, contact us. Talk to our general counsel. Those kinds of things. But putting them in place, I think they're a good idea, because it's a different world. Understand that if you're going to come into a public pool and use the pool, you are increasing your chances of exposure to other people. And by doing that, the HOA is not going to be held liable. You know, so that's, again, it's going to come down to each HOA's determination of what they think is best for their association. Is it more important to have the pool open, or is it better just to have the pool closed until things get better?
I think we're all kind of waiting to see what happens with this next round of potential release from the federal government and see if they include any liability waivers in there.
Agreed.
This next question, it's, should similar precautions be taken for association events where you bring in food trucks, snow cones, things like that?
Absolutely.
For folks who are looking to do things for summer.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't, I think you have to weigh the benefit versus the risk versus the reward right now, right? I mean, it'd be nice to have, there's tons of things that I wish I was able to go do right now, but I just can't. And so if you are going to have a gathering, an association sponsored gathering on your property, then putting protocols into place about social distancing, especially if you're bringing in outside food, making sure that everybody's notified, that's where you really want to look into the waiver thing about putting it out there that, look, if you come to this, you're coming at your own risk. I personally, if I was general counsel, which I don't do I don't do any general counsel work, those are probably things that I would just not be recommending that you do right now. I just don't think the risk associated with what could be a one-day relief because you're getting to go to a fun event, I don't know that the risk associated with that is acceptable right now. Hey, in a month from now, that might be different. If we start tapering back off and infections are going down, then yeah, okay, then maybe things are a little bit open. But if you are going to do something like that, putting some real social distancing protocols in place, food trucks, this is me externally processing right now. Have pre-packaged food things that you're just handing out. Don't have one big snow cone machine that everybody else is using at the same time. Anytime that you can just hand somebody a food item as opposed to everybody commingling around one thing and getting their food or their hamburgers or whatever off of it, I think is probably better. And I'm sure that there are protocols out there, like if you look at John Hopkins or the CDC, some of these other websites, they probably have good protocols in place for that type of stuff, and check all that. Anything that you can show that you were as diligent as possible about protecting the people that you were going to put together is going to be better for the association if something does happen. If you just say, hey, we're going to have a food truck out tonight and it's a COVID relief party, everybody show up and people come and somebody gets exposed, that's a lot different other than you saying, we're going to have a COVID relief gathering. Here are the protocols. Only for association members. Nobody can be within 6 feet of each other. Everybody needs to wear a mask. Nobody can bring outside food items, whatever. Showing that the association did its due diligence to try to put protocols in place is always going to be better as opposed to we really didn't have any protocols in place at all. So anyway, that's probably common sense, but that's the best I can answer.
Never hurts to hear it again.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do now is, those are the questions that came in through the chat. I'm going to unmute all, and I hope it's not a free-for-all. So if anybody has any questions, you can mute yourselves.
I have no idea what he's saying.
And please, we'll open it up here for the next minute or so and see if anybody chimes in. This is less formal than probably your traditional webinar. So if anybody has any questions, I'll cycle through here and see if I can see anybody raise their hand. I don't think you've got any. You may have done just a tremendous job during the presentation.
I'm not sure about that. I'm sure people are ready to go to lunch and tired of hearing me talk.
That might be it too.
Yeah, because people are getting off.
Right, exactly. They're like, oh, that was good. I'm going to lunch now. Anyway, well, thank you for letting me on, Jesus, and I appreciate it. And let me just throw this out there. If you have questions today that come up or you didn't want to ask today or you think of something later on, we're always here. So just contact us and we're happy to talk over anything we can with you. But I appreciate
that.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Again, this will be sent out via email later on this evening. For more information, you can visit our website, caihouston.org. We've got a coronavirus resource page on there. And thanks again. And if anybody has any questions, we'll send out Cass's contact information with the email, and you're free to contact me for anything you might need with CAI or COVID related, and hopefully we can help.
Maybe this is the only speaker after all.
Right.
Three listed.
Thank you, guys.
Well,
Thanks, Jesus. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.